So we're starting a new series today called To Be or Not to Be, and in Act 3, Scene 1 of William Shakespeare's, one of his most famous plays, Hamlet, the prince, the self-proclaimed Hamlet, quotes this famous line, right? You know, at the beginning of his soliloquy, to be or not to be, that is the question. And I won't repeat the whole thing because I don't have it memorized, and quite frankly, I don't care that much about the entire thing. But it's this question that, is kind of, stuck with us for almost 400 years. It's a question that is famous. It's you may not know anything about the play, but somehow you've heard this phrase or you've heard this question repeated on a show, in a film, and in theater, or just kind of, happenstance where someone has said it. And for Hamlet, at this kind of juncture of the play, he was contemplating his own existence, whether or not it was worth it to continue living or to take his own life. And so he had this question about to be, is it better to be or is it better to not be and not know what happens on the other side of my existence? And it's a question that for him was both eternal and existential, and it was a question that he was asking in that way, but it's a question I think that we ask in a very practical way, not in a suicidal way necessarily or on a daily basis, but in a way that we maybe contemplate from the type of existence we have. Obviously, you're all here. So it's not a matter of do you exist, you do exist. You're present, you're with us. And so it's not a matter of are you existing, but when we talk about this series and titling it To Be or Not to Be, we're talking about the type of existence that you have. Because to be, if you're gonna be, requires that you have some sort of existence, that you have some sort of means of living or some sort of way about your life. Because no one really wants to kind of navigate life in a ho-hum kind of way, you know what I mean? No one ever, as a child, grew up thinking, you know what, if I can just make it to a point in life where I have no motivation, where I have no passion, where I have no desire to do anything ambitious, where I have no desire where life just kind of happens to me and I don't get to do anything that I choose, it just kind of falls into my lap and I'll just take it as I go. If I can get to that point of life, then my life will be great. No one really thinks of that. No one really feels that way. Instead, we aspire toward, living a life that is fulfilling. We aspire toward, we have dreams of, I'm going to be some sort of person or some sort of, have some sort of career or have some sort of ambition or some sort of hobby or some sort of retirement. We grow up having these things, right? Like you ask any child, what do you want to be? And it's a teacher, a police officer, or a firefighter, or a professional athlete, or a singer, or an actor, or an actress. And so you have all these different dreams and aspirations when you're a child, and your mindset is really that I'm going to work to become that. And so there's kind of this drive that kind of determines the type of existence you have, whether or not it comes to fruition. There's a lot of different things that go into that. But in your mind, you had a dream to do something, be something, and become something. And the thing about that is that, that's kind of this idea of all around wrapped in this idea of being present, of being engaged. Because if you're going to become a professional athlete, you've got to be engaged in the sport, right? No one just, hey, I'm Ricky, I'm 32 years old, and today I'm going to be a professional hockey player. That's just not how it works. I mean, not for me anyway. Maybe for someone else, but it's just not the reality of it. If you're going to be a computer programmer, you don't just all of a sudden, 35 years old and decide, well, today I've never touched a computer in my life, but I'm going to be a computer programmer today. Now, you could become one down the road, but you're not going to become one in that moment. And so the recognition that it requires me being engaged in something, it requires me being present in some sort of activity or some sort of hobby or some sort of, involvement in something in order to do something, to make something happen and for it to come to fruition. And you think about, like, even in this context, your most fulfilling relationships are the ones where two people are engaged or where two people are emotionally, relationally present, right? Your best friend or a romantic relationship. It requires, or it's the reason it matters or it's so significant is because two people were connected and were present in that relationship. Think about your most fulfilling achievements, right? Whether it's graduating college, getting this like kind of dream job, whatever it was. I'll just use college as the example. If you graduated college, you think about when you walk across that stage and receive that diploma, it required you to be fully engaged at some level. You had to go to class. You had to do your work. You had to, complete those projects. You had to go through years of education before you could walk across that platform. But when you walk across that platform, and when they call your name, and when they give you that diploma, all of a sudden you got this huge grin on your face because you realize the recognition that it took, and the work, the engagement that it required for you to experience that moment. You know what I'm talking about? And you think about your own work. If you get a promotion, or if you get a raise, or if you get moved into kind of a new sector or a new kind of division within your company, and someone recognized your talent or your work ethic or your ability, the reason why it's satisfying is because you poured your heart and your soul into that job, and someone else took note of it, and you find like, oh, okay, this paid off. Yeah. And the reason for that is because to truly exist requires you be fully engaged. If you're going to truly exist in this world, it requires that you have a full engagement. You can't live or you can't really exist in the way that you would want or the way that you would aspire to without being engaged in the world around you or in the activity that you're pursuing or the career that you want or the relationship that you want. Now, my wife loves me. Kristen and I married 11 years, right? So she loves me to death. But if I checked out of our relationship, and if I just emotionally said, you know what, okay, I've put in the time, I'm good now, and put on autopilot, like things are not going to go well. For as much as she loves me today, she's not going to love me that much tomorrow. But if I engage, and I'm choosing to be present, and I'm choosing to be connected, all of a sudden the reward and the fruit of that is a healthy and hopeful marriage, not just one that's kind of stagnant or idle or one that just happens to function or exist because we've cohabited for so many years and so we might as well just stay put in this situation or in this place. Now, the good news about this is that you can choose this for yourself. Like, that's good news. So it should excite you. The bad news is we don't choose this for ourselves. The bad news is we don't choose to be present in the moment. We don't choose to be engaged with what's happening around us because we're so concerned and consumed with what's ahead and what's next and what's out there and what might be versus what actually is. And so we don't make the decision to be present. We don't make the decision to be engaged. We get caught up, we have these beautiful things called smartphones. And like they're so addicting. And they're, you can set all these notifications, to pop up and to come through. And so you get, so-and-so liked your photo on Instagram. So-and-so left a comment on Facebook. So-and-so watched your Snap. And then that's not even like your email or your calendar notifications or your reminders. And all of a sudden we get so consumed. And this isn't a bad thing. This is a good thing. But this thing has made it a lot easier for us to not choose this. Because we're wondering what might happen in the digital world, or because we're wondering what might come up over there versus, hey, I'm having a conversation with you, or I'm here in the moment with you. Let me make the most of this situation. Let me make the most of this moment versus thinking about what could be or what could come. And so we miss out on the opportunities. We miss out on the possibility of what's going on. And listen, this isn't to point fingers and say everyone else is off with this, because I'm notorious about this. I don't think I have ADD, and I also don't know I have ADD, so it's not like one of those things. Someone else may say it, but my mind just feels like it's spinning and kind of bouncing around from one thing to the next. A lot of times I feel like if I were to describe a picture of what's happening in my mind, it's a lot like a pinball machine. And maybe you've never played a pinball machine because you're younger than me. But like a pinball machine, like this ball is just like bouncing from here, and then you hit this thing and it bounces over there and it triggers this, and and all this stuff is happening. I feel like that's how my mind works. Someone said this, and it goes to this, and then boom, 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 and I'm connecting all these dots. And if you weren't the pinball machine doesn't work for you. If you were to kind of put it up on a wall, it would look like one of those CSI crime scene things where they have like pictures and like details of clues and hints and then they have like strings connecting all these different things. I feel like that's how my mind is. And so sometimes to be fully engaged, sometimes to be fully connected or to be totally present is not that it's extremely hard, it's just that I've made a habit of not being engaged, of not being present, because it's been easier for me to focus on something else. It's been more rewarding for me to look to something else. to worry about what's ahead, to think about, okay, well, what about tomorrow? What about this at this time and this time? And then that's going to lead to this. And instead of thinking, you know what, like, well, what's happening right now? Who's in my life right now? What's taking place? What am I missing out on as a dad? What am I missing out on as a husband? What am I missing out on as a friend? What am I not contributing as someone who can make a difference in this situation? And I don't think about those things because I'm thinking about a bunch of other stuff that may or may not happen, and I end up missing out on what could happen right now. You know, and to a large extent, you know, we could kind of just say, like, well, that's just the way it is, right? Like, it's just the world we live in, it's just, you know, the society that you know, we're a part of, it's just the culture, it's just the nature of having a new phone and having all this technology, you know, kind of wrapped up in our hands. But here's the thing. We didn't start a church to continue in the norm. We didn't start a church because we're satisfied in the status quo. We didn't start a church because we love or we're content with the complacency that exists. We started a church because we wanted to see lives changed. We started a church because we want to see a culture shift. We started a church because we wanted to break a mold that exists and kind of take what exists, the things that we don't like or the things that we say, no, this is damaging us versus helping us, and we want to shatter those things. And we started a church because we want to empower people like you who want to change this city and change this world, and we want to empower you to do so because you believe that everyone should come in contact with the transformative power of Jesus. And so we didn't say, hey, let's start a church because we're okay with the way things are. Because we're satisfied in letting that be our excuse or our reason to not do something, to not engage, to not be present, to not make a difference. We didn't start a church for those reasons. And the fact of the matter is this: every situation or every act of transformation requires your full engagement. Every act of transformation requires your act of full engagement. In fact, if you were to go through the totality of scriptures, if you were to go through this book and look at every miracle, every moment where someone's life was changed, where a person became a new person, where something was made different, if you were to look at the sum of this, what you would find is that in every instance, whoever was on the other side of that, whoever provided the miracle, whoever provided the transformation, whoever experienced the transformation, had to be fully engaged in order to be the recipient or the beneficiary of that transformation. And the person who enacted it had to be fully engaged. And so what I want to do for the rest of our time this morning is kind of walk through a passage of Scripture where you see really kind of a window into Jesus' life, and to see how transformation took place when he chose to be present, when he chose to be fully engaged. And you can see through the life of Jesus how much of a difference it makes. And my goal and my hope as we go through this series is that you don't just look at it as something that Jesus did, but look at it as something Jesus was calling you to do. In fact, more importantly, that Jesus was calling you to be someone who's present, to be someone who's fully engaged. That as a follower of Jesus, we weren't given an out to just say, well, Jesus can take care of that, and I just stay from afar, or I remain at a distance. Instead, as a follower of Jesus, we've been called to step into it, to be engaged, to be present, to be connected with people. And so if you have a Bible, you can turn to Matthew chapter 8. And I'm going to kind of go through, I'm going to do something maybe a little bit different, where I'm going to teach basically through the whole of this chapter, but I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights as we go. So we're going to start in verses 1 and 2, and Jesus is kind of coming out of his famous Sermon on the Mount. So he takes some time to teach a crowd of people up on a hillside, and he's speaking the word. He's kind of, bringing to life who he is and what it means for them. And in Matthew chapter 8, beginning in verse 1, it says this: Jesus has now left the mountainside. And it says, large crowds followed Jesus as he came down the mountainside. Suddenly, a man with leprosy approached him and knelt before him. So pause. Jesus is kind of leaving, right? He just got done teaching an extended period of time to a large group of people. So the time is done. Church is over. The service is wrapped up. He's trying to get home and taking a Sunday afternoon nap. And as he's trying to leave, all these people are following him. And as they're following him, it's not just that they want to kind of see where he goes next, but then now a man with leprosy approaches him. A man who, by the law, should never have been in that close proximity to Jesus. In fact, the moment he arrived 50 steps within the nearest person, he would have to shout, "Leper, leper," to identify that he was contagious. And so this man sees Jesus coming down from the mountainside, sees the crowds around him, and says, you know what, it doesn't matter. I need to approach him. And he approaches him, and it says that he asked Jesus to be healed. And Jesus, in the moment, engages with this man. Doesn't shove him out and say, hey, take a step back. It wasn't like I Am Legend where he's like, has like this, dart gun that he's trying to shoot at him and hoping that that'll tranquilize him. He engages this man and chooses to heal him. And the man is made whole, and the man is able to re-engage in society. But then you drop down to verse 5. Jesus moves on from this guy, and he tells him to go and tell people that he's been cleansed. And then verse 5 says this: when Jesus returned to Capernaum, his hometown, a Roman officer came and pleaded with him. So now he gets home, he gets back to his village. You think, okay, great, I get to chill out, I get to relax a little bit, did my part, served the people. You know what, I even had a bonus miracle in there. I healed a guy that was sick. I'm going to get some extra crowns in heaven for that one. I'll be good, I'm going to take it easy. And he gets home, and now a Roman centurion, an oppressor, a foreigner, he's not a Jew. He's not someone deserving of the blessings of God. In fact, he's someone who's, burdening the people of God and enforcing harsh laws and acts on them. And it says a Roman centurion came to him and pleaded with him. He had a servant that was sick. And he pleaded with Jesus to heal his servant. And Jesus engages with this man, chooses to connect with this man, chooses to be present in the moment. And he says, okay, fine, let's go to your house. I'll go heal your servant. The Roman centurion replies, no. Listen, I have soldiers at my command. If I tell them to go, they go. If I tell them to come, they come. Jesus, you don't even need to come with me. Just say the word and my servant will be healed. So Jesus speaks, and the servant is healed, and he's made well. And then in response to this, he tells them, I've never seen so great a faith in all of Israel in response to this Roman centurion. Okay, so great. Boom. He still hasn't made it home yet. He got done teaching. He walks down a mountainside, heals a leper, gets into town. A Roman centurion is bothering him. He heals the guy's servant. Now it's time to go and chill out, hang out with the buddies, maybe relax a little bit. Drop down to verse 14. It says this: when Jesus arrived at Peter's house, it says Peter's mother-in-law was sick in bed with a high fever. So now, you get to your buddy's house, and you're supposed to chill. Sit down, relax, maybe have a little bit of food. It's been a long day. You put in the work. And Peter, his wife must have been nagging because he's like, Jesus, you gotta take care of my mother-in-law. Like, she's sick. She's not getting better. My wife won't let it go. Something's got to happen. And Jesus goes on and touches her, heals her. She gets up and starts serving the guests, and starts providing for them and caring for their needs and giving them what they need. But again, you got to put yourself in Jesus' situation. He had every reason to opt out. He had every reason to say, hey, enough is enough. It's just a fever. She'll be okay tomorrow. Give her some ibuprofen, Tylenol PM, knock her out. Like, things will be great. I mean, surely if he could heal her, he could have at least invented Tylenol PM, to just hand it off to someone else and just say, take this to her, she'll be fine. But instead, he connects with her. He engages with her. Then he's hanging out, chilling. Okay, time to watch TV. Verse 16, this is what happens next. That evening, many demon-possessed people were brought to you. I mean, if things weren't wild enough, like if things hadn't been busy enough, all of a sudden now the crazies are coming out. Now it's like legit I Am Legend. You have the demon-possessed people who are being brought to Jesus. They weren't showing up on their own. They had people who cared about them. People who were aware of their issues, of their struggles, of their hurts. And they knew there's one guy in this town who can do something about it. And I don't know how late it was. I don't know how long of a day it had been. I don't know how tired he was or how tired they were. I don't know how exhausted they were. But they decided this is our only option. So let's just bring it to Jesus and see if Jesus can do something about it. And so he says he cast out all the evil spirits with a simple command and healed all the sick. Again, a situation, a moment where it's like, another one? Not just another one, but another one's like a whole bunch of them. And Jesus chooses to engage, chooses to be present. He's had enough of Capernaum. So he decides, you know what, it's time to leave. Verse 18, Jesus says this, and then we'll put verse 19 up on the screen. But verse 18 says this: when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he instructed his disciples to cross to the other side of the lake. Get in the boat, let's get out of here. But on his way, verse 19 says this: then one of the teachers of religious law said to him, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." So this guy interrupts. Again, Jesus is just trying to get out, trying to escape, trying to let's go to another part of the town and part of the region. Let's try to escape what's going on. And a teacher of religious law approaches him. Says, "Hey, I'll go wherever you go." Jesus is like, "Don't you understand? I'm trying to go where you're not going to go. I'm trying to leave where you're not going to be. I don't need you to go with me." But instead, Jesus engages with this guy and has a conversation with him about what it takes to follow him, about what it costs to be a disciple. And he takes a compassionate approach to instructing this guy, saying, if you're going to give up your religious life, and if you're going to give that up to follow me, here's what it's going to cost you. Here's what it's going to take. Here's what it's going to, here's what I can promise you, but it's not going to come easy. And this guy responds in faith and obedience in pursuit of Jesus. So they get to the other side of the lake. Then you jump down to verse 25. They get to the other side of the lake, they're in the process of getting to the other side of the lake. Jesus is exhausted. He decides he's going to take a nap on the boat. They come into the middle of a storm, and then verse 25 says this: the disciples went and woke him up, shouting, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." So Jesus can't even take a nap. His own boys are bothering him now. His own crew. The guys that were supposed to be understanding and say, "Yeah, he's had a long day. Let's let him rest." But this storm is ravaging their boat, and they're freaking out, trying to think, what do we do? How do we survive this? How do we come out of this? And all of a sudden, they say, "You know what? I know he's sleeping. I know he's tired, but we've got to wake him up because we're not going to survive." And Jesus awakes, and he speaks, and he calms the storm. They arrive to the other side of the lake, and then verse 28 says this: when Jesus arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gadarenes, 2 men who were possessed by demons, not those guys again, 2 men who were possessed by demons met him. They lived in a cemetery, and they were so violent that no one could go through that area. 2 men who were violent men, aggressors, demonically possessed, inflicting harm on an entire region, so much so that people wouldn't even go through that neighborhood or through that area because of 2 people. These men approached Jesus. A moment where you could have fear, a moment where you could have worry, and you could rightfully bow and say, "You know what, we shouldn't even be in this part of town. We shouldn't even be in this vicinity. We shouldn't even show ourselves here. These people have been terrorizing anyone that passes through." And these men approached Jesus, and Jesus rebuked them, cast out the demons, and healed those men. And it says those men went back to the village, and the people were astonished because there were 2 different people, entirely changed and entirely transformed. And in each of these instances, what you find is that Jesus had the opportunity to disconnect. Jesus had we would say, the right to remove himself from those situations, to say enough is enough, to say, I've done my part, I've done the work, I've put in the time, I spent all day teaching and helping people and giving them hope and preaching and sharing the gospel and giving them good news and letting them know you're the salt of the earth, and a city on a hill, you're the light of the world, and a city on the hill should not be hidden. This is who you are, speaking and breathing life into these people. It would have been enough. He walks down a hillside, and a leper, a man who shouldn't have been anywhere close to him, approaches him, and Jesus says, "I'm going to engage with you. I'm going to connect with you. I'm going to heal you." Gets to town, and a Roman centurion, an oppressor, someone who's burdened Jesus' family and his people, says, "Jesus, I need you." Jesus speaks, and his servant is made whole. Hangs out at his friend's house. And his mom is sick, or his mother-in-law is sick, and he says, "You know what, let me just heal her and take care of her." try to chill a little bit, and then demon-possessed people start showing up, and the house gets packed, and he heals them, and says, you know what, let's get out of here. Before he can get out of there, someone stops him to ask a question. He answers the guy's question. The guy says, okay, I'll follow you wherever you go. He gets in a boat, tries to take a nap. His disciples can't even handle the storm. They wake him up, and so he wakes up, calms the storm, gets to the other side, and then two violent people are over there trying to, create some sort of havoc, and Jesus rebukes them and heals these people and transforms their lives. And every situation, Jesus had an opportunity to choose to be present or to choose to withdraw. To be or not to be. To be engaged or not to be engaged. To be present or not to be present. To be connected to not be connected. It was his choice. And in every situation, in every moment, he chose to engage. He chose to connect. He chose to pour out more of his heart. He chose to give more of his healing. He chose to give more of his love, more of his compassion, more of his understanding, more of his time, and more of his friendship. And because he did that, every situation, every moment led to massive transformation. Every person, every situation was radically transformed because Jesus chose to engage. The sick were healed. The foreigners found faith. The once sick is now becoming a servant. The religious person found freedom. The storm, the chaos was calm. People who were violent or once violent had now ceased and aborted their violence. All of this stuff transformed because Jesus chose to be engaged. You know what the kicker is in all of this? This all happened in about 12 hours of time. 12 hours of time. So then the question then becomes to you, what would your day look like if you chose to be fully engaged? If you chose to be present? What miracles could happen? What healing could be found? What compassion would be experienced? What love would be felt? Whose life would be different? Who would walk from darkness into light? How would your life be different? If you chose to say, God, open my eyes and help me to see what I can't currently see. God, soften my heart so that I'm not jaded, so that I'm not hardened, so that I'm not just, well, that's how New York is, and I'm a New Yorker, and it's just the way it is. What would your day look like? How would God want to use you? Because Jesus didn't do this to say, hey, this is a one and done, let me show off real quick, and then I'm out. He did this to say, this is what I did, and greater things will be done with you. How will the world be different? How would our city look different? How would our neighborhood, our building, our places of work, how would those spaces and those environments be radically transformed, and whose life would be radically changed because you and I, chose to be present, chose to be engaged? That's the power of full engagement. That's what could happen when you answer this question, to be or not to be. The choice is ultimately yours. It's up to you to determine what you'll do with it and what type of existence you'll have. So let me close this in prayer, and then we'll dismiss. Father, we thank you for this word. Lord, we thank you for the power of engagement. We thank you for the power of presence. Lord, of being fully connected, fully engaged, and not just in a physical way, but in an emotional, spiritual, and relational way. God, that it's a transformative thing, that it's something that unlocks hope, that unlocks potential, that creates opportunity for the miracles to take place. The things that we thought were once impossible, the chains that we thought held us forever are released when we choose to be engaged and present with the people in front of us. Yeah. So, Father, my prayer is that as we take this message, that we would internalize it, that we would go about our day today different. We don't have to wait to action this till Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or next week. We don't have to pray about this. We don't have to contemplate whether or not this is for us. We already know those answers. The question is, do we choose to be present, to be here, where you've placed us, You've ordained for us to be in this location. You've ordained for us to be in this neighborhood. Not just us as a church community, but us as individuals. And so, God, we pray that we would take advantage of that and that we would use our ability to connect, to engage, and to be in such a way that it changes the city and changes the world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.